Good morning. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the NBA Betting Show. With me, as always, Mike Lockey from Bitcoin headquarters, Matt Mazelman from some unknown location in Jersey. I am Mike G. And to follow up yesterday's enthralling 57-minute recap of the Bucks-Raptors game, we are going to do a recap of the Bucks-Raptors game. So, Matt, let's talk about what we were looking for yesterday, what happened, what didn't happen, what we got into, what we hedged out of, what's relevant. There was anytime Giannis is questionable, there's always opportunities. What happened? What did you do?
Yesterday was just pure chaos, and there's a lot that we got right and a lot that we didn't get right. So with this game, I'm not really sure how to have played it better. It's just the news doesn't break the way that it's supposed to.
You sound really negative about this one.
The Raptors didn't win. I'm negative because I ended up with some money on the Raptors and it lost. That's why I'm negative.
I ended up with like net zero, and I thought I looked at the sheet and I didn't remember seeing any relevant. Well, how did it finalize at the very last second? I thought it was like 5.8.
Well,
I had 5.5.
I had Raptors at -2.5 from overnight. So
gotcha.
Yeah, and then I was adding. Well, we were pretty confident that Giannis and Drew were going to be out. I was very confident that they'd be out.
And sure, we were 80-20 or whatever. And sometimes that 20 comes in like it did here on one side. Drew ended up being out. Giannis ended up playing. Yeah. The line still only moved to 5.5 after Drew got out. Right. I think the line would have moved massively if Giannis was out. I absolutely think it was necessary. We got Raptors -4.5. I thought that was an easy play. And I think hedging out was at 5.5 afterwards was fine. We only had a 1 point middle or a single point as a middle. But like, I still think that was really, really plus EV.
Yeah, I mean, it was plus EV in light of not having information yet, given the way the information was likely to break, which is what we were talking about when we were on here. But we had the game projected at 6 at tip-off, even with just Drew out. So
okay, I saw that. I thought it was closer. Well, the line was 5.5 though. Yeah. So okay. So I guess if I had 2.5, I would have kept a little bit extra on the Raptors, which I only had -4.5. So I went ahead and went net zero.
My hedge wasn't a full hedge, but I did hedge some just because I was overexposed to the game. Yeah, because the other thing that was hard is sometimes we get the news and the way that it's lumped together, we don't know what's going to happen. And I'm happy that we talked about this yesterday with the Bucks in particular, where they don't have like a Twitter account that is associated with their injury report. It just comes from Underdog because Underdog is getting it some other way. So the injury updates come in one by one, and we got George Hill, Ingles, and Drew. And at that point, it's not actually clear if Giannis is going to be the next name that pops up on your phone for a push notification. So when I saw Drew, I just bet more because the news was happening and the line wasn't going to go backwards at that point. Like just Drew being out was enough to give us a neutral at worst bet. But then like you don't know if you're about to get a Giannis notification and you don't want to miss it because Drew being out is enough to just tank all the odds off the board everywhere. Like they're going to pull the line at every site. Drew is important enough just on his own that if you get his update, so like we could have been, this situation happens with Kawhi and Paul George a lot where they're both in doubt. And you hear one and it's like, there have been games where we're only betting the other team if both guys are out. And one comes in first and now you've got 5 seconds to decide, is the other name about to drop? And I've had it where I've tried to wait it out and the lines go off the board after Kawhi is ruled out and then 5 seconds later Paul George is ruled out and then you miss it.
Yep.
So it's really hard to time those sorts of things when you have multiple key players that you're waiting for news on the same team because it's not always going to come in together.
But okay, I'm gonna make a point though. This is why I had -4.5 so I didn't have to worry about it, right? Because when you have two pieces that are so large, let's say I'm gonna make up a scenario. Let's say they're both 80% to play. Well, what is 80% times 80%? I don't actually have this
64.
memorized off the top of my head, but it's a much lower number, right? So the likelihood
64%.
that somebody's out, it starts becoming relevant pretty quickly.
Yeah, I actually do have all those memorized. Like anything that is a free throw percentage that is like semi-normal, the percentage of that guy hitting.
Okay, so what is 80 times 80? Like what is the odds of that?
Mike G has
about 64%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the
I
probability
think I
that
could have
both
done that
guys
in my
play.
head, but I decided
Right, so
to not risk it.
but that gives you a 36% chance that at least one of them is out. In
Sure,
this
yeah,
case,
that's the larger point that I'm making, right?
Yeah.
So even in extreme scenarios where we think that where we have them both probable by our definitions, even then you still have a 1/3 shot of like somebody being out in the line.
Right.
So like when there's multiple pieces, I get a little more aggressive in having things already set in place.
Right. In this case, though, just Drew being out wasn't enough to give us a positive bet. Just Giannis being out would have been. So it was a little bit of a quirky situation. And
when it comes to the Giannis, the Jokic, the guys of that
Right.
gravity, as I like to say constantly, like I don't know. There's no being prepared for that is so valuable that like I'm going to be willing to lose some juice here and there as a result.
Yeah, if all you
Yeah,
lost on that game was a tenth of a unit because you hedged, you had given yourself enough upside that I think that was fine to play it that way.
Yeah,
I
that's
actually
the point.
could have
That's the-
sold. I meant to sell the point too. If I went from 5.5 down to 4.5 on the Bucks, I would have saved a couple bucks too. And
Right,
that was
yeah.
something I could have done.
Yeah, so just to recap, since we give them as Mike was just saying, when the there's only a few of these guys, right? Giannis, Luka,
The MVPs.
Trae Young,
Paul George is also one of them.
Total. What's that?
Paul George
Jose
also is
Alvarado.
one of them. Yeah,
Sure,
Jose
sure.
Alvarado. But yeah, there's only a few of them.
Right, but for these guys that move the spread so much, especially if you're a non-mat human that isn't on top of it every second of the day, you do have to do some things like Lockie was just talking about. Get that -4.5, so at least you have something. So you have to give yourself the opportunity for the huge upside because there was potential for huge upside. But then you got to be smart enough and willing to eat the juice to just bet the other side to at least get out of the bet.
Right.
So that's where when Mike was describing it, he did yesterday, which I think is a really great way to play it. If you can't be on it at all times of the day, at least get something that gives you the upside.
Yep.
Go ahead, Mike.
I got something to follow up with here. So I will go back and give credit to Matt because he actually pinged me and reminded me, hey, if you're still interested in hedging, now would be the time because the line moved in a place that was favorable. I would have probably missed that had he not reminded me just because I had life going on. However, this is a larger point. We currently have a very small DM chat that we use regularly. I think it's getting close to time to start opening up a brand new Discord server with just us and including that link in here. Well, I just think we should just start getting audience members that like this to be able to ask us questions directly in a Discord server. And again, obviously we're not committing to being full-time available all the time, but if we're doing this with each other, we might as well do it in a private group to start growing some customers and building some relationships.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of when, not if for that. I don't know when we're going to do that, but I think it's going to be at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up again.
There's another point that I mentioned briefly yesterday before we go on to other games. And I promise the other recaps are going to be faster than this one because this is the one where we had a lot happening. But expected value is not always just a matter of projection is this, line is this, the probability of winning compared to the odds is this. Like expected value can also have to do with like estimates of scenarios that we don't know yet, because it's not always true that there's a binary comparison between the projection and the betting line. There's also potentially, I guess it's uncertainty in the projection because we don't know the information yet. So in some cases, we know everyone who's going to play and we know what our projection is. In a case like this, we're essentially saying there's like an 80% chance our projected spread is going to be this. There's a 10% it's going to be this. There's a 10% chance it's going to be this because we don't know the information yet. So we're basically creating an expected value around probabilistic assumptions. And the best way to not have to do that is to sit in front of your computer the entire day and just wait. But that is not possible for 99.9% of the world. So without doing that, you're essentially estimating probabilities of players and making the best decision you can at the time, given the information you have. And yesterday, it just seemed very likely. And again, like, we're never going to know how likely was Giannis to be out because he wasn't out. And we don't know, like, He's not going to say, yeah, there was a 90% chance I was going to be out, but I just woke up and I was really mad and I played anyway. Like, we're never going to know what the truth was behind that situation and what went into the decision process. But, like, I think in hindsight, it still made sense to predict that he wouldn't play. Like, he's been dealing with a lot lately. So I just wanted to clear that up. Like, how are we recommending bets when we have no idea who's going to be in or not? We're giving our best guess estimates and not just like gut feeling, like probabilistic based estimates of probabilities of players playing or not playing. And
anybody that's watched this show since we started, which probably isn't very many people, but anybody that has noticed that this track record has done quite well so far. So even though this one only half worked out, I mean, Drew is certainly relevant, but Giannis is obviously at another catastrophic level. You've been very, very, very good at hitting these, and that's fine. You're gonna you can't get them all. That's not possible.
The annoying thing is it's been less good lately, and the best calls that we had like 2 weeks ago or so are the ones where the bets didn't win. Like, the results have been better, but the calls have not been as good. Like, we got the Jokic thing and the John Morant thing, and there was a Giannis rest game a couple of weeks back, and there was like a streak where it was like 12 days in a row of star players out, star players out, star players out. Like, it was on fire, and we were winning half the bets. Like, we weren't even doing well.
I got buried with 12 points of closing line value recently. Right. So I unfortunately, reality is that these guys are all professionals. They can all put the ball in the bucket, and on any given night, any team can beat any team, but the market is generally quite efficient, aka it's going to move to appropriate and more efficient places. We are continuously getting bets in with massive closing line value. Yes, we're going to lose them sometimes. That is a fact, but I believe in the process more than ever, and we're going to keep grinding.
So that's also a good segue to other games of the market being relatively efficient, because the market is not fully efficient. And we know this from certain things like Gary Payton II. So yesterday, are we cool to jump to other games? Let's not talk about Toronto-Milwaukee anymore.
Our big W from yesterday.
Yeah, and then we will get to Paul George and tonight's Clippers game, because that is the one major thing going on. But just to continue a little more from last night, Minnesota was an underdog against Portland. We had Gary Payton as a pretty significant impact. His player rating is 3.7. And he got ruled out, and the line didn't budge. Minnesota was still plus 1.5. I don't. He was
also going to be on a minutes limit too, right?
Yeah, so but his impact if
he was playing off the bench either way.
If he was not on a minutes limit, his impact on that team is like 3 points, and on a minutes limit, it was like 1.5 or 2. Like, he's still very important even on the minutes limit.
He's not going to start when he's fully healthy, is he?
He should, but I don't think so. When he's fully healthy. I asked
that question very carefully.
Yeah, when he's fully healthy is also never happening. So I don't
Understood.
know. Yeah, he's just going to get injured again every game. But yeah, he's a great player. So he got ruled out. The line just didn't move for him. Minnesota won the game. We had them projected to win by 3.5, and they were underdogs. So at game time, there were actually a few +2s available. So that was like 5.5 points of value. It was a close game, but they ended up winning. Like, it was pretty much as scripted that they would just have a narrow lead through the entire time. Like, this one, I mean, the public clearly thinks Portland is better than Minnesota right now, but we get these edges where the market is inefficient in a specific way, I think, where, like, Karl-Anthony Towns is out, and everyone thinks he's an amazing player, and he's good. He's very good. He's a borderline all-star, probably. But the combination of Justice Winslow and Gary Payton being out on the other team is as important as Towns being out. And a lot of that has to do with backups. Like, this is the part where the market is the most inefficient, is it doesn't account for the drop-off to the team's other players. But
most stars only play 2/3 of the game. And that other 1/3 of the game is played by the backups. And the backups really, really range in quality from mediocre to awful. So understanding how the entire chessboard interacts with each other and how every piece interacts with every piece is what we're doing with this model.
Yeah, I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns is backed up essentially by Kyle Anderson and Jaden McDaniels, who are pretty good. Anderson rates really competent. Well. And the Blazers are backed up. Like, Winslow is not even that good himself. He's like a slightly negative player rating. Payton is really good, but the backups behind them, Shaedon Sharpe and like Drew Eubanks when Nurkic gets in foul trouble, but Eubanks is the backup center more when like Winslow plays backup 5. Him being out means Eubanks is playing more. It means Trendon Watford is playing more. Peyton being out means Shaden Sharp is playing more. Like these guys are awful. They're just really bad. Like they all rate -3 or worse. So the Blazers have no bench right now until they get healthier, and taking one guy off the court, like in that context, is like losing Karl Anthony Towns. And I think most people would have said Minnesota was going to be a better team than Portland before the year. Portland's overachieving, Minnesota's underachieving. It's really weird to see Minnesota being a home underdog in this context. But
do you think Cat's getting close to returning?
Yeah, so I do want to jump to futures at the very end here. That's one team.
That kind of intrigues me a little bit.
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, I'm going to hate talking about this, but there are a couple teams at the bottom of the West that are on the verge of passing the Jazz for the last play-in spot. Yep. And I think both are worth betting. That would be Minnesota and the Lakers, but we'll come back to that. Yeah, it's going to really hurt me if it happens, but I think it might be worth betting on those outcomes.
Understood.
But for the rest of yesterday, there wasn't that much else that was super interesting. I think we should spend like a minute or two just on Embiid.
Okay. Where
I probably overreacted to him getting downgraded because a lot of the time what happens is we have a projected edge on one way, and then that team's star player gets ruled out, and now we're going the other way, but we were showing like 1.5 point edge on Philly when Embiid got ruled out, or when he got downgraded initially, which means that
I'm understanding your problem here, and I agree with it completely. And I suffer from this paralysis of I know this line's moving, but I don't know if I want this bet after it moves. But I feel like an idiot leaving money on the table because any amount of money I put in right now is about to be worth like 10% more in 5 seconds.
You've got to be able to like know in your head a little bit how much the player is worth as the news is happening, which Embiid is someone we should all know. He's worth between 4 and 5 points because we talk about him all the time.
Yeah, he's massive. And it was more last year because of his backups, but
right.
They didn't even play Paul Reed last night. That's another story for another day.
Well, yeah, last year Embiid was worth like 8 or 9 points. This year, though, every time we talk about him, he's worth like 4 or 5 because Montrezl Harrell is good. And normally he doesn't play for some reason, but Montrezl Harrell is pretty good. Paul Reed, who sometimes plays, is like average. Losing Embiid is about a 4 or 5 point impact. So if we've got 1.5 points of value on Philly and then Embiid gets ruled out, we're now going to, it's only like a 1 unit bet the other way. And sometimes that feels really weird. Like, holy crap, Embiid got ruled out. He's like a top 5 player in the NBA. Like, bet the farm. It's just a 1 unit bet. Like, it's just...
yeah, but part of betting the farm is to hedge out, right? So, like,
yeah, but not everyone has the bankroll available to be able to do that. So, like, we've talked about that enough. I think, like, it is a decent strategy to try to, like, create some arbitrage. And you can do that.
Well, you can bet $5 on one side and $10 the other side. Bankroll isn't an issue here.
Well, right, but if someone bets their whole account, then they don't have any money left to hedge.
Okay, when I say bet the farm, clearly I have like 4 or 5 accounts or whatever. I'm assuming people have other. You get like one of your accounts all in, and then you use the other one to, like, I don't know. Like, obviously you can use half the account and then play it the other way. But yeah, every game needs its own game plan, and maybe we even start looking a little harder at, random guys getting queued here. How are we going to handle it?
Yeah. But yeah, I think like the average person can certainly bet 3 units one way and 2 units the other way. But that's like a complicated process of trying to get arbitrage that is separable from just regular betting. Like we're not focusing on that much. And I think rightfully so, because the average person doesn't want to spend the time to like grind out a few extra cents on every game just to be like just on the off chance that some crazy news happens that we haven't even talked about yet. So
this guy does.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can talk about stuff that applies to only us some of the time, and I think that's perfectly valid because some people will want that. But like, there was the value on Indiana with Embiid out was like 2 points or 2.5 points, so it was worth having a small bet on them, and they covered. And like, that's the conclusion of that. I think for now we can come back to this over betting and hedging thing later.
I think the point is deciding what you want. Like in that scenario, I was off this game, right? So I had nothing here. But if I had any amount on the Pacers, in reacting to that news, then my response would be, okay, the line's now moved to this. Here's the situation. I would have determined we only have 2 points of value closing here. I would probably then move it down to like somewhere between half or 1 unit net on the Pacers. I would hedge off partially, and then I would basically just restrict the size of my exposure to my new desired range. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, the problem with that, and like we'll move from here in a second, but the problem is that it's not always that easy, because if Embiid were ruled out just for out of nowhere, that's what you do. But he got downgraded to questionable. And that happened last game.
Yeah, obviously that does. Yeah,
right. Like you couldn't overbet that one because you get stuck with the bad bet if he plays. And we just saw this 2 days earlier, where Embiid got downgraded in the morning, like right after we got off our show, and then wound up playing. And like the line corrected back to the other direction, where if you had bet a bunch against Philly in that game, that was the New Orleans game, you didn't really have an opportunity. Like you were going to lose on the VIG. That's what happened to me. Like I lost money on the New Orleans Philly game because I bet one way and then I had to bet the other way, and there was no middle even. I just had to bet the same number to get out of the bet, and I just lost like a quarter of a unit for no reason. So if the player is downgraded from in to questionable,
well, theoretically you could also like I would imagine the line moved 2 points instead of 4, or maybe 1.5.
That's in the.
In that same vein, though, like you could have the opportunity to bet it in response to the news of him playing before it overcorrects, right? So, like,
right.
I've also been in scenarios where I've had to, my hedge opportunities include creating a negative middle where I can lose both bets. I do think that you can do. I just think there's other ways to play it and prevent that.
But you do have to be like diligent and at your computer all day to play a lot of those like variables and versions of this.
Sure.
So for like the simple version, if a guy like Embiid gets downgraded, it is worth betting, but you don't want to go crazy when the value, even if he were ruled out, is only like 2 points. Like it would be crazy to bet 6 units or something when you could easily end up with a bet that's negative EV that is like 6 times.
I think a larger point here is like a random Q tag is still just a random Q tag.
Right. It doesn't mean the guy is out. Yeah.
Right. I'm like, we do talk about random downgrades in the afternoon is a pretty bad sign, but that was kind of early in the day.
Right. That is a key point, by the way, just to like flag that. The earlier in the day the questionable is, the more likely the player is to play. On average. Every case is different.
I think that's fair.
Closer to game time, more likely the player will be out.
I agree with that.
And it's sort of like an increasing thing. Like I don't think
there's like a 5:30 random Q tag. That guy ain't playing.
Yeah, I don't think there's a true inflection point, but just on average, the later in the day, the less likely the player is to play in the game. Should we? There's no other game from yesterday we need to do like an extensive breakdown of, but I'll just do a quick recap of them and then we'll go to today.
Sure.
All right. So we didn't cover our Knicks game, but like closing line was 10 there. We were recommending it at -8.5 and -9. Like that's just whatever. That just happens.
They had some big leads in that game too.
Yeah, they did. And then New Orleans was the opposite. We had a bet there, and they held on, almost gave up the backdoor cover. And then the one other game, did we talk about Evan Mobley yesterday on the show? I don't even remember.
We just talk about him not mattering.
Well, or that when he plays, the line will inflate for him because the market.
I don't know that we
good.
Mentioned that, but we have mentioned that before.
The Suns ended up plus
you got
6.
6 or 6.5.
Yeah, it ended up 6.5 at tip-off, or right before tip-off, and we had projected 3.5. So we got a Suns cover 2 for a partial unit if you were able to bet that one. Yeah, there were some good and some bad yesterday. There were a lot of bets, and it's a lot more than we have today. That's for sure. Because there's only 4 games on the schedule. And
unless Paul George doesn't play.
Yeah, that's really it for now. All right, do you guys have anything else from yesterday, or should we talk about that one?
Nope.
The only thing I just wanted, we talked two quick things about Giannis. I'll cover these real quick. So one, we just talked about some of the massive games he's put up lately. He did have another.
Russell Westbrook.
He had
30 points, 20 rebounds.
The reason I said that is because he had 12 turnovers.
I was going to say then he had the unusual quadruple double with the 12 turnovers.
Yeah.
But so just another thing to keep an eye on how much he's kind of trying to take over in these games. So just something to watch for.
Do you think this is an MVP push by him, or this is just Drew and Middleton not being there? And
no, this is MVP push and counting stats push to me. I made that Russ joke last night because I actually think like his team's going to stop getting rebounds and like letting him get them the way Russ was doing.
This team is good. Like they just to be clear, also Brook Lopez had almost 20 rebounds in this game. The Raptors made no shots. Like they got to 101 points because of the end of the fourth quarter and overtime. The Raptors were losing 90-69 with 3 minutes left in this game.
Oh yeah, that I forgot about that. Also, the first quarter was 13-12. They shot horrendous. Both sides did. It was a really weird game.
Giannis and Brook combined for 40 rebounds last night. Brook was not letting Giannis get rebounds. They were just both getting a lot of rebounds because the Raptors couldn't score.
Got it. The last thing I want to say on Giannis here is I don't believe he is a stat monger. So I don't think this is an MVP push. I think this is him just recognizing that the team has not done well. We talked about how they were basically, a 500 team after that great start?
Yeah, they were 9-0 when they are 16-13 since.
Yeah, so I think this is just Giannis realizing that he needs to assert himself more with this team. And it's going to result in some crazy counting stats and also some things like 12 turnovers. But yeah, I don't think he's hungry for stats. I think he just knows he needs to do more. The thing that my favorite Giannis thing of all time was when they were in the final, the year that they won the championship, there was a big play where he had this huge block where he kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
it looked like it was going to be an eight and jam.
I have the Suns in the series. I remember.
Okay. Did you hear his quote afterwards? Because he was like facing one way and then just like jumped blindly the other way, and ended up making a career highlight block. His comment after the game was, "I thought I was going to get dunked on, but there was nobody else there, so I had to do it." So, there's so many guys that just won't do something because they're afraid of being posterized or whatever. The guy just wants to win. So, this isn't, I don't want to go overboard on the Giannis love. I'm just saying, for somebody like there's something to keep an eye on. Again, like I don't know if we get an extra bump or it's more of the props to look at. I'm not saying even anything about MVP voting. Just there's something going on there.
I do think the thing that there is something statistically that's actionable is, I mean, the lines may start accounting for it now, so it may be too late, but Giannis' assist numbers with Drew and Middleton not there, both of them not there, he's clearly had the ball in his hands more. So it's probably too late. Drew is going to play next game. He was out because of conditioning on the second night of a back-to-back, so he's going to play most of the time. But with both of those guys out, Giannis clearly has a usage bump that maybe projections are not accounting for. So we may see an assist line of 8.5 for him the next time Drew and Middleton are both out, and then it doesn't matter. But it's something to keep an eye on, I think, because he does seem to have to do way more without those guys.
Gotcha. The other thing, I'm just going to touch on it real quick. We can bring it up on another show because it's not urgent, but I have a case to be made for the defense of Shaedon Sharpe when you're talking about how terrible he is and why it really hurts when Payton's out and Shaedon Sharpe gets more minutes. So we should get to today's game, but I'm just going to bookmark a little Shaedon Sharpe love. So moving on, let's look at what we got potentially for today. What do we look? You want to start with the Clippers game, or you want to end with that?
Yeah, that's all we really have, honestly. Okay. So, yesterday I tweeted that Denver -6 was going to look really good if. The specifics of the tweet don't matter, but basically what it was is we had questionable tags on both George and Kawhi. And then an hour later, Kawhi wasn't on the injury report anymore. I thought both guys were going to be out for this game because Kawhi sits both ends of, he sits one leg of back-to-backs anyway, just no matter what. I think it's been every game so far. At some point, they may stop doing that, but I think he's still in that window where, he's going to play. If he's playing tonight, he's out tomorrow. I'm pretty confident in that. So I thought because he was dealing with an illness and missed the game versus Miami, they would just give him one more day and then play him tomorrow. And then George re-aggravated his hamstring injury and was limited in practice. So my hunch was both guys were going to sit and then Kawhi was going to play tomorrow. I thought George would miss both games of this upcoming back-to-back because it's the same hamstring injury that he was dealing with before that kept him out for a week. I think it might have even been more than that. So now Kawhi is playing, and now I think the situation is they're going to try to stagger these two players across the back-to-back, where George sits tonight and plays tomorrow, and Kawhi does the opposite. George could play tonight, We don't really know. We got some very vague updates from Tyronn Lue. The one thing he did say, though, which was sort of indicating to me we were going to get some guys missing games, is he said Robert Covington is going to play we're going to see him play over the weekend. And Covington isn't normally projected for much, like he doesn't play really. Covington has the third highest player rating on the Clippers, but most games he's just not playing. They just don't like him or something. So right now Covington is projected for 1 minute, like from Stochastic. And the only way, I mean, Nick Batum is already out, but they like playing Terrence Mann. They'll just play Marcus Morris and Norman Powell, and I'm just looking at the list over here. Zubac might play a couple extra minutes because they don't have, like, they can't go small as much. They don't necessarily have to play Covington just because Batum is out. I think the Covington comment indicates that he'd be filling in for Kawhi or George. Like, that's the scenario where he plays a lot. So I thought that was sort of a tell that one or both of those guys would be out for tonight's game. And I still believe that Paul George is not going to play. Yeah, I still think Paul George isn't going to play. But I'm not as confident now because, like, the Kawhi thing sort of messed up my entire theory of what this situation was. And it would have been nice, like, we had a chance to get both of them out, and then we would have been projecting Denver, like, minus 13 if Kawhi and George both didn't play tonight. So right now, we actually almost have a bet on Denver as it stands, even with Paul George in, at minus 5. If he's out, we're going to have north of a 1-unit bet at minus 5. Because the line is
making it.
Yeah,
so
so when I tweeted it, I bet a half unit at minus 6, and I've already gone. My bet is already looking worse because the line is going backwards. And then I'll check my spreadsheet. I already have a half unit at minus 6, and then another half unit at minus 4.5. So if you could just bet minus 5, that's probably slightly better than what I have currently going for me. But I would bet some now if you don't have the opportunity to be around today, because I'm pretty confident George doesn't play. Like, I think it's 70-30 he's out. So the ideal thing to be able to do is just wait for the news and bet it when it happens. If you can't do that, I think, 1, he's probably not going to play. And 2, even if he does play, this is not a bad bet. You will get some negative closing line value because I think if George is in, the line's going to move to like 4. So you would lose, like, it's a bit of opportunity cost to bet it early. But if you're busy today, you can just bet it now. And worst case, you have like a neutral bet. We'd have 1.3 points of value at the current number even if he's in. Because I think, well, one other wrinkle here is Aaron Gordon there's been some talk about him having a shoulder issue. I think he's just playing through it. But yeah, like, the Clippers are just overvalued in general. Like, we've had enough of them, you know. Like, we know this by now. Like, we've bet against the Clippers a lot lately. So even with George in, we still have a Denver bet. But with him out, like, he has a 5.8 player rating. Paul George is really, really good, and the Clippers are not a deep team. So,
remind me what Ty Lue said about Robert Covington.
Should I try to find it specifically?
Yeah, this could be the biggest piece of the puzzle to me.
It was essentially that okay, here we go. It was, we could definitely see Robert Covington on this 2-game trip for the Clippers, or whatever. There was a beat writer summarizing.
We could definitely see. That's less positively wordy than I was hoping.
Let's say that does translate to him actually playing more than the 1 minute that Stochastic has. Does that lessen the impact of George being out? Like, is it not not another 6-point swing, but it's still what? I mean, how positive does 538 see Covington?
Well, that's why I have George estimated at 3.5.
I'm saying this because
that's why he's only 3.5.
Yeah, it's already. I already have this accounted for. Like, what I'll do sometimes, so people know, like, how. I don't always check for this, but if there's a quirky situation that is different from what we usually have, I will actually go into the team tabs and subtract all of George's minutes and then add them accordingly to where I think they'll go, and just look at and anyone can do this. If you make a copy of the spreadsheet for yourself, you can go into each team, delete the players' minutes, and then add in that amount of minutes across whatever players you think are going to get them. So let's say you just disagree with me on who's going to play if the guy is out. Like, maybe you just disagree that maybe Covington is just going to get in the rotation anyway with George in. You can just manually maneuver the minutes and see how much the team rating moves. And if I give half of George's minutes to Covington, it obviously lessens the impact than if I had given them to like Amir Coffey and guys who are bad. So there's two reasons the estimate is only 3.5, even though his rating is 5.8. One is backdoor covers, and the other is Robert Covington is pretty good. And I'm assuming he's going to get a large share of those minutes. So that's already, like, we're good there. Like, I think, like, we don't have to double count that. It's already accounting for Robert Covington being the guy who takes George's spot and him having a good player rating.
I'm interested in a full unit at -5.
Yeah, I mean, if George is out, it's worth more than that. You're saying you want to bet that much now.
This is a normally this is a half unit spot, but like this is a 2 half unit spot to me. This is like there's two levels of confidence in the early seed planting stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's like a 70% chance we have a 1.3 point edge, and there's a 30% chance that we have a 4.8 point edge.
You think there's only 30% that George is out?
Did I say those backwards? Yeah, those are backwards. I think 70% out, 30% in. So 30% of the time, we're going to have 1.3, which is like zero expected value. It's not negative, but it's like a neutral bet. And then at 4.8, that's going to happen 70% of the time. That's my rough estimate, which gives us like, we can do the math on this, but the expected value of that is like a 3-point edge or a 3.5 point edge. Any like math nerds can do that better than me. I'm one of them. I'm not saying you're separate from it, but yeah, you can do it. You can do the equation of that if you want. I think like on average, we have a 3.5 point edge because the upside is 4.8, the downside is 1.3, but the 4.8 is a bit more likely. Yeah.
50% of the time, it works every time.
Thank you for summarizing that.
Yeah. All right, so Mike, I agree with your 2 half units, aka 1 full unit now. While we can get it, assuming we can get it at the -5.
Yep.
All right, anything else? Anything else for today, or is that?
We should still keep an eye on Memphis resting players, even though all the starters played reduced minutes last night. Like Jaren Jackson has had a long injury history. And Desmond Bane also is, I think, I'm not sure where he's at physically, but he sat the last back-to-back just for injury management. And it was a blowout last night. All the starters played less, but I still think it's 50-50
I agree with you.
For Bane.
One of the like 6 relevant Memphis players is getting the night off.
Yeah, I think Bane is the most likely by far because he's the one who was injured most recently. But I think for us to it's Bane is the most likely. Jackson, I think it's like 10% that Jackson sits because he didn't have to play that much yesterday. If the game had been close, Jackson's probability would have been much higher.
I agree.
And then John Moran, I don't think is really much chance at all to sit.
I don't think so either.
Let me just check again how many minutes those guys actually played. But I don't think, I think they were all in the 20s. But if the game had been close, we would have been talking about all 3 guys. I think right now it's probably.
If that game was close, we would have been taking Orlando last night.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So Morant played 27, Bane played 26, Jackson played 24. And I think Bane, just because he was injured pretty recently, stands a good chance to be out, even though he played only 26 minutes. But for Jackson and Morant would be big surprises. But it might be worth just being ready for that because the estimated impact of those 3 players combined is like 10 points. So right now we actually have an edge on Memphis, almost a bet. I don't recommend betting that because there's enough downside if someone's out. Like even just Bane being out means it's not a good bet anymore. But if we got that, and I think now would be a good time to start getting push notifications again from Grizzlies PR, which we have not talked about in a while, but Grizzlies PR is the best one. Because there's a couple like this. Just make sure I have it. It's just at Grizzlies PR. So it's great for that reason. The username is very simple. There's no underscore. It's just Grizzlies, letter P, letter R. They, along with the Blazers, and I think that might be it. They don't just tweet the injury report. They tweet it as a screenshot, which means that Underdog, whatever their mechanism for repurposing that, Yeah, they're like, it's not in text, it's in a screenshot.
Yeah, it's not easy to get.
And there's a bit of a lag time. So
Interesting.
you can, like, this has happened before where I've seen the Grizzlies PR screenshot with the list of players on the injury report, and it'll say like doubtful or out. And then by the time Underdog has tweeted the names, it's been like legitimately 25 seconds. Like, it's a big lag time. And the books are using, I think they're just using Underdog.
Yeah, they're probably using a single source, not a combined combed set of sources. Even though, why would they not? But anyways,
they may change soon. Like, it may be just a matter of time before they start doing it a different way. But for now, sure, like, there's gonna be a bit of a window where you can actually get a bet in if all three guys are out.
Yeah, but how are you operating though? Since you don't get the dinner update on the Memphis PR,
I don't know.
That's all. One.
I probably need to. You're right. I need to just unfollow and block them because the only good Twitter accounts are the ones that tweet out what the reporters are eating, and the Grizzlies PR is terrible. It's the one thing that Wolves PR has on Grizzlies PR is their Cajun chicken pasta.
Yeah, the post-game pizza.
Yeah.
Right. So, other than dinner updates, is that anything else to keep an eye on, or just to tell folks to keep an eye? Yep. What else are we looking?
Okay. One is if the Mavericks get up to 3.5, we can start looking at them as a bet for tonight. That one's pretty simple. Like, the sheet's just going to update, and we may have a Mavericks bet. The other thing is, just a reminder, this is Luka versus Tatum on TNT.
Yep.
And the MVP thing, I mean, I'll tweet it at some point tonight during this game, probably. But if the Mavericks win and Luka is at all his normal self, like, not even a crazy Luka game, but just his season averages.
37-7.
Yeah, if Luka's near his season averages and the team wins tonight, his MVP odds will change. His probability will change and the actual odds will change. I think the odds are going to lag behind the actual probability a bit unless he goes for like 50, 10, and 10 again. Like, if he does one of those, the odds are probably going to move pretty fast. But Luka's MVP case, and you can see the video, I took a clip from yesterday and just put it on the YouTube channel. His MVP case is really solidifying right now. Jokic also plays tonight, so we can sort of gauge how those two players are both doing. But this could be a night that really moves the needle MVP one way or the other. Like, if the Celtics win by 40 tonight, which they sometimes just come back after a loss and just play really great, and the Mavericks get blown out, and Jokic is the one who has a really, really good game tonight, maybe we're making Jokic bets, because the betting odds right now actually have, I think Jokic is in 4th now on FanDuel. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but yeah, let me just actually show this. His MVP is starting to get pretty interesting. Why is this not working? Okay. Stand by. This is going to take like 5 seconds. I think it's important that people can actually see what the odds are, but not working yet. Okay, here we go. You guys can't see him yet?
No. Oh, wait. There it is.
There we go. Okay, that should be pretty clear, right?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, Jokic at plus 500. Like, I think he could definitely be you could argue he's number 2 right now. Like, that his probability might be above 20% already. I don't know. Like, it's really hard. Like, these are estimates. We don't know what the probability for MVP is, and it's a subjective thing. Like, it's based on voter sentiment. It's not an objective measure of anything. But I think Luka is clearly the favorite right now, and it's kind of vague who's in second. And if Jokic has a monster game tonight, I think his game is on TNT after the Boston-Dallas game. Yeah, like, a huge Jokic game could move the odds to second place. His probability could move up to like 25%. Like, the break even on Jokic after tonight could be like 3-1, and he's 5-1. So a really, really strong Jokic game, I'm interested there too. Like, these odds are probably a little bit too high for him. But I'm not betting it yet. It's just going to be based on how tonight goes. So, big night for MVP. We don't really have a bet yet for Boston, but this could matter quite a bit. And then there's one other thing that I want to talk about futures betting wise before we jump off. I hate this one.
What you got?
I really. So the Lakers and Timberwolves are both entering the picture a bit, and both teams are about plus 150 to make the play-in tournament. There's like I don't know where exactly the odds are for those, but here, I don't need to pull this one up, but let me just check DraftKings really quickly. I think both teams are right around plus 150 to make the play-in tournament. Minnesota, I'm more interested in, but plus 130 on DraftKings for Minnesota, plus 140 for the Lakers. The Lakers, I'm waiting for a positive AD update. Like, I don't want to make that bet until we get, like, AD is going to return soon. But for Minnesota, like, they only have to pass one of these teams. Yeah. And I also think the Western Conference is starting to separate a bit where, like, the top 4 or 5, their records are good enough where we don't have to... Like, Denver's not making the play-in tournament. Memphis is not making the play-in tournament. Even with Zion out for a few weeks, New Orleans is not making it down to the play-in tournament. I think Dallas has moved themselves far enough. Like, it's starting to separate where there's going to be like 1 through 5, and then there's only a handful of teams that could wind up in the play-in from 7 to 10. So it's Portland, it's Sacramento, it's Utah, it's possibly the Clippers, although they could move above that too. And then the Lakers or Wolves could just pass one of them, and that's all it takes. And these teams are all very even. I think we have the Lakers healthy, rated better than Portland and Sacramento. The AD and LeBron Lakers have a higher team rating than the Kings and the Blazers do. So if that were to happen, we're actually going to start going pro Lakers, which has never happened before in my life, but that may happen soon. So Lakers are more for later. I think the Minnesota bet might be worth having now, though. But the line's not going to move so much in the next week. Like, they have important games they've been playing. Their next game is tomorrow night. Tomorrow they're playing the Clippers. So plus 130 to plus 150 range if they win tomorrow. That's so we can revisit that one. But yeah, this is very unfortunate for Utah futures, but Utah's on a 5-game losing streak, and there's a real chance that Minnesota or LA passes them. And then Sacramento, like, Sabonis could re-aggravate his hand. Portland could just start not winning because Portland just isn't that good, especially if Gary Payton is injured again. So there are a lot of ways that the Lakers or the Wolves sneak into the play-in tournament.
Yeah, not for this show, but we should probably flag somewhat soon, starting to talk about as the trade deadline approaches.
Yeah.
You know, which teams are buyers, which teams are sellers, and
getting ahead of that is really profitable.
Some of these bets here, they're really going to crystallize when you see, all right, are the Jazz going to try to move some of their guys to pick up more assets? We talked about Toronto potentially going. They could be buyers, they could be sellers. The Lakers, you would think, are going to make a move because LeBron's the GM, and he's going to force them to make a move. I mean, there's a lot of things that. These teams could look very different within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
When's the trade deadline's in Feb, but it's coming. It's coming up. And I was listening to a pod recently where it may not be the big trading deadline day. There may be some stuff ahead of time because there's a big advantage for if you're getting first. Like if you can get to the Lakers first to try to get that 2027 or 29 first round pick. There could be the teams that are going to be selling maybe lining up a little faster to try to take advantage of a team like the Lakers or the Knicks, the teams that feel like they have to make a push. There's others too. It's not just those two. But anyway, more, so we have potential trade discussion, then we have potential Shade and Sharp love to bring up on future shows. I'm sure
the Nuggets and the Grizzlies are 2 games back from the Celtics for best record in the NBA. It surprises me a little.
Yeah. Just in the projected standings, yeah.
No, in real life right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's both, actually. Yeah, that's those markets, too, like best record in the league. I've seen some of those, and Brooklyn is in second. Brooklyn is not the team you want to bet there. Before the winning streak, yeah. But, like, Memphis and Denver, yeah, there's some... I'm definitely interested in those two potentially to overtake the Celtics, but... I still think the Celtics are the rightful favorite, but that has narrowed. Yeah, I mean Boston clearly has lost some games they shouldn't be losing recently. Like I think they were like 3-7 or 3-6 in their last 9 games, something like that.
No, man, the Thunder are just good.
Yeah, Isaiah Joe is just good. But yeah, there's a lot of future stuff that we definitely are going to start paying attention to more, because there's this sort of inflection point, and maybe this is like the last point before we wrap up, but there's sort of this inflection point where at the beginning of the season, the market doesn't react much to things changing like game by game because it's so early. They just don't care. Like they're devoting resources to other stuff. So at the beginning of the year, the books are just not really paying attention to like, oh, the Jazz beat the Wolves tonight, let's move the division on. So they just don't care. Towards the end of the season, they care a lot. So that's going to gradually increase throughout the year. But we also care more throughout the year. Like the games later in the season are more predictive of where the standings are going to end up. So there's a point somewhere in the middle where we care way more than the market does, because I don't think these two charts are like exactly aligned. And I think we're in that window now where individual games are already starting to matter quite a lot, largely because they influence what the teams will do at the deadline. Like the more games the Raptors lose, the more likely they are to trade away Fred VanVleet. And the more games they win, the less likely they are. So we're caring a lot about that. And the market is not yet, the market doesn't really, it's not concerned with that yet. So each individual game, like a Utah-Sacramento game, is far more relevant to the actual probabilities than it is to the book's probabilities. And we're going to be in this sort of middle space like that, where we care about individual results more than the books do, probably right up until the deadline. And then after the deadline, the market will start to pay attention a lot. So for the next month, essentially, we're just going to care a lot about future bets. Like it's going to be a thing we talk about a lot.
Got it. All right. So guys, keep an eye on the Preaching Sense Twitter account.
Who's this year's Celtics, Matt?
There isn't one yet. There will never be another one unless the Jazz win the championship.
All right. Sorry.
But we'll see. We'll see if we get one. I'll let you know.
Okay. Keep an eye on the Preaching Sense Twitter account. Matt will give us updates as possible. News will be forthcoming about when we can get you guys into a Discord group with us. Tomorrow, I am on the road to the Sixers game. Matt and Mike are going to be doing the 10:15 show.
Yep.
Right? There may be a Twitter Spaces show potentially in addition, but YouTube show tomorrow. Carry on without me, guys, and good luck to all of us tonight.